What is this sorcery? You mean to tell me we're actually following through with this? Law Week is actually happening? Hell yeah, it is. This is Law Week, Day 2. Take it away, awesome intro. Also, Law Tekking's little preamble, if we have time for that, maybe.
You betray the law! Law!
Okay, yeah, hey everybody, how you doing? Law Tekking back again for Day 2. One quick thing I wanted to bring up before I continue, though. I couldn't help but notice that my entire speech from the last episode got cut. Like, the whole thing. Like, I was here talking for 10 minutes, giving this speech. I had practiced it for literally months, and all of that got cut. Now, I understand things have to hit the cutting room floor and all that, and I understand it was probably an accident, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It's okay. I could go through the whole speech again, though. It's fine. So, basically, what I was going to say... Ah, there it is. I love you, Law Tekking. You were one of my greatest friends that I respect the most. Yeah, okay. Well, today on Law Week, we will be discussing the Law light novels. Law light novels, you say? I haven't heard of those. Well, mostly because there aren't multiple ones. There's only one, Law light novel, singular. However, it was released in multiple parts in the One Piece magazine initially, so I can understand if you haven't heard of it. It's a little bit obscure. So we all know the One Piece magazine, right? It's been in serialization for a few years now, and basically, from issues 4 to 7 of the magazine, they released chapters 1 through 4 of this light novel. And then after the last chapter was released, a book was published that had all 4 chapters plus an epilogue, which was the proper Law light novel. However, I think it was only released in the official Japanese, and there was no like English, Spanish, French version of it like internationally, so you could still probably find a copy of it somewhere out there, but it would be in Japanese, right? And I think the One Piece magazine is still doing this with Heroines, if Heroines didn't wrap up already. So Heroines is a story also released chapter by chapter format in each issue of the One Piece magazine, focusing on the female main cast of One Piece. So that's pretty cool. So after Heroines wraps up, there will probably already be a book, in planning for publishing of that, okay? So we're talking about the Law light novel today, which was written by Akinari Sakagami, and, honestly, just going through the summary here, and that's pretty much what we're going to be doing, because I have actually not read the whole thing, because I cannot read Japanese. This is mostly just from summaries I found online in the wiki. That's mostly where I'm taking this from. Although on the wiki, there was like a short summary of each chapter and the epilogue, and then there was a longer summaries, but that ended after chapter 2. So that wasn't like the long summaries weren't available for the whole thing. But I think I get the basic gist of it, and that's really what I'm going to be doing here today. We're not doing like a read-along or like a discussion or something to like deeply analyze every single chapter in depth. I'm just going to go through all chapters and the epilogue of the Law light novel to give you a basic idea what it's about, okay? And who knows? Law is a very popular character, as we all know. I'm basing an entire week of videos around him. So it stands to reason, just like with the Bleach light novels that I have right here, that it's possible that the Law light novel, and maybe the Heroines as well, might get an international release someday, so we can hope for that. But anyway, from what I'm looking at in the light novel, like the basic summary, I understand it's not going to include everything, but this looks like a really good piece of fiction, and honestly, I could see it 100% fitting in the One Piece world in the canon. So this could fit into Law's backstory 100%. Maybe Oda might not focus on this part of the story in the main manga, because he already knows that this exists, and I'm sure Oda did some consulting work on it. We know that in the SBS, it was revealed that like Law met Sachi, Penguin, and Beppo at that moment on Swallow Island, and that's included here in the light novel. So I feel like, yeah, Oda worked with the author on this a little bit there. So that might be the reason. Like Law's like, hey, that story already exists in light novel form. There's no reason for me to like go into detail with it in the manga. But who knows? Maybe if we focus on Law a little bit more, maybe we'll see a flashback of like the events of this novel. But I could see it fitting perfectly fine. And most of the stuff is honestly things we could already assume. Like Law meets Sachi, Beppo, and Penguin, and then he joins up with everybody and makes the Heart Pirates. This also explains how they got their submarine, the Polar Tang, and really just sets up everything for them starting their own pirate crew. And there's still a lot of stuff that's like left up to the reader to determine after the fact, okay? So let's just start with chapter 1 of the Law light novel here. So this kicks off 3 days after the events on Minion Island, I believe. So I'm sorry if I keep mixing up the islands. The reason for that is during Law's flashback flashback that we got in the manga involving Corazon and everybody. It was mentioned there were 3 islands in the North Blue, and it was Rubeck Island that I believe was the place that the exchange between the Marines and the Barrels pirates with the op fruit was supposed to go down. Like, that's where that the exchange was going to happen, but then Doflamingo got involved, and and then Corazon and Law tried to steal it directly from the Barrels pirate base, which was on Minion Island. So most of the action that occurs during that flashback with the bird cage and everything, and then Corazon getting shot, that takes place on Minion Island. That's also where we have Virgo, masquerading as a Marine and everything. Law tells him about what's happening with Corazon, and then Virgo and Corazon meet each other. Just bad luck, really. But yeah, that was all on Minion Island. Swallow Island was another island that was close to those other 2, okay? So Law, I guess, a couple of days or maybe in the hours immediately after Corazon died, he manages to get away. Doflamingo has to escape because Osuru's fleet is approaching. So Law figures out some way to get out of town, maybe hops on a ship, and then ends up on Swallow Island. However, he's still severely wounded, and also he's still afflicted with the Amber Lead Syndrome. So he attempts to walk into a town called Pleasure Town. It's not that, trust me. It's actually a much more wholesome reason for why it's called Pleasure Town, because I thought the same thing too. It's like the red light district in like Amsterdam or something. No, it's actually very wholesome. Anyway, Law approaches the town. However, he's afraid to go in because he just remembers all of the, remember every single hospital they went to, him and Corazon, they got literally chased out of there. So that's just gives you an idea of how much power the world government has in the propaganda of Amber Lead Syndrome. So they went into the hospital and be like, hey, this kid has Amber Lead Syndrome. Can any of you, top tier doctors in the country help? And the doctors were like, what? He has Amber Lead Syndrome? Ooh, he's icky. Get away from me. We don't want him in here. He's like, yeah, but, you're doctors. Can't you put up a screen and, quarantine him? No, he's disgusting. Get him out of here. He'll kill us all. It's like, yeah, but he's sitting right here, and I've been with him. I've been traveling with him for weeks. I'm not sick. He's like, oh, you have it too. Get out of here. We're doctors. We flail our arms around a lot. Ew. That's basically how every doctor responded. So with that reaction, Law was kind of having second thoughts about going into town, even though he's starving. However, there's a lady from the town that actually does go up to Law and is like, hey, are you okay? Do you need any help? And the Law just kind of just runs away. It's just like, well, you see, bye, and then just runs away, and the lady's like, what? Okay, whatever. So anyway, he runs away, and he finds himself in a cave outside of town. However, the Amber Lead Syndrome, it was already severely, harming him back when Corazon was alive, so this is 3 days later, so it is literally on the verge of killing him at any minute, okay? And he has to figure out how his new powers work in order to save himself, because Corazon, remember, he said, listen, you're the only person that can use this power, but it's not magic, Law, you can't just will yourself to get better. Just like after Corazon got shot and Law was trying to use the power to heal him, he's like, it doesn't work like that. You need to figure this out on your own, but I know you can do it. Okay, and then Corazon died, of course. So Law's in the cave. He's spewing blood. He's barely conscious. He's like, I'm going to die here unless I figure out something. And so it didn't really go into detail on exactly how he used the ability or how he first learned how to activate the op fruit. But I like to think Law was kind of sitting in the cave and he was just remembering all of the medical training that his dad and his mom had given him, back at Flevance, and he was just thinking oh man, okay. Calmly think, how would this fruit work? How would this fruit work if it's something involving doctors and surgery? Okay, what does a doctor need in order to work? It's well, one of the first things you would need is you would need a proper operating room. Operating room. Room? Holy shit, that's cool! I like to imagine that's how Law, because he's only 13 years old right here, okay? He's 13, he's about to die of this severe illness, he's coughing up blood and shit, and he's like, okay, I need an operating room. Okay, now what? So if he could figure out how to activate room, then from there on he could, begin to discover, wait a second. And then I imagine Law just started taking off pieces of his body, separating his arm like he's Ida from the Owl House or some shit. And he's just like, wait a second, I can, disassemble my body parts in this room. Oh, wait a second. So then maybe he can figure out a way to scan his body and figure out where all the amber lead is. See, this is the reason why the op fruit needs to be wielded by somebody that has doctor skills and training, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do this. But Law being a child prodigy, this fits perfectly, right? So Law being able to be okay, I have this room opened.
It would be nice if I could do a scan or something. Oh, okay, all the amber lead is in my liver. Okay, that's good. Well, now it would be good if I can, like, remove my liver and... Okay, I removed my liver. He's, like, sitting there in this cave holding his liver, and it's covered with, like, the spots of the amber lead. And it's like, okay, I guess I just... And he just sits there in this cave, removing amber lead from his liver bit by bit, like... It's just like, my dad always told me I would never know what to expect when I became a doctor, but I don't think he was talking about this. And he's just like throwing the amber lead away, and he's like, all right, I guess I cleaned out my liver. I guess I just, okay, operation done. And then he just passes out, okay? And then he wakes up the following day, and his skin has cleared up immensely from those white splotches that were, like, covering his whole body, and he feels a lot better, and he's like, okay, I guess I'm healed. Awesome! So, okay, it worked. Okay, that's how Law cured himself of the amber lead, and he first started to learn how the op fruit works. Okay, Law then wakes up the following day in a house. He's being cared for by this old man named Wolf. I can't show you what he looks like because it's a light novel, but I always picture Wolf to look like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. You know, if I use Rick Sanchez for Vegapunk's appearance, then I'm going to use Doc Brown for Wolf's appearance. He's like this kindly old inventor type, okay? And so Wolf was like, yeah, I found you in the cave. You were about to die, so I brought you back to my house and made sure that didn't happen. And Law's like, okay. But he doesn't tell Wolf about anything involving Doflamingo or his past or Flevance or the Amber Lead because he's like, I can't really trust anybody right now. You can imagine Law has some trauma from that. So he's like playing it close to his vest, basically. And he's like, yeah, thank you. And so Wolf is like, okay, well, you could stay here and you can live here and I'll feed you and everything, but you have to work, okay? And he's like, all right, well, what kind of work? And he's like, well, I'm an inventor, so if you stay here, you'll have to test my wacky inventions. And Law's like, okay, I guess that sounds cool. I mean, he doesn't really have anywhere else to go, you know what I mean? So he's like, all right, I guess I'll stick around here on Swallow Island, you know, working with this old man and his inventions right outside of Pleasure Town. You know, when you put it like that, it's a little bit weird, but okay, that's the status quo. So we cut a few days later where this is the meeting between Law, Sachi, Penguin, and Beppo, where Law is out wandering around while Wolf goes into town to get some supplies. Law's taking a walk around the island, and he runs into Sachi and Penguin, these two ruffians, bullying Beppo, who was a young polar bear mink there, who left Zoe and, you know, to try to find Zeppo, his older brother, and he got washed away, and then a ship picked him up, and it ended up here on Swallow Island in the North Blue, okay? So Law shows up and uses his ability to basically like switch Sachi and Penguin's place with a bunch of rocks, and so they fall out of the sky and they kind of hit the ground and they're sort of defeated. And then Law grabs Beppo and then they go back to Wolf's house. Okay, so they kind of leave Sachi and Penguin on the ground for right now, just like, oh, those bullies were bothering you, come over here. And so Law introduces Beppo to Wolf, and Wolf's like, huh, you found a polar bear in the forest and it talks. All right, well, if he works testing my wacky inventions, he can stay. So Wolf is nothing if not accepting, okay? And Law and Beppo also have like a moment where they're kind of like going to bed that night and they're kind of talking to each other like, hey, why did you save me? I'm just a polar bear. And just like, well, you know, you were being picked on and that's not cool to bully somebody just because you look different. And then Beppo's like, oh, that's nice of you. I like your hat. It's very poofy. It's just like, yeah. And he's like, he goes on to say like his backstory of like, I was looking for my brother Zeppo, but I fell off of a giant elephant and got washed away here. Law's just like, cool. I'm gonna go to bed now. It's just like, all right. And so they continue like this until about a month later. So it's Wolf, Beppo, and Law that are all living together now. They hear an explosion in the woods, and so they go racing to see what the origin of this explosion was, and it was actually Sachi and Penguin that were attacked by a boar. And so Penguin, I guess, took out these explosives that they stole from the town and started chucking these explosives at the boar to try to kill it or deter it to get to go away. And the explosion actually goes off in one of their hands, and I believe it's Penguin that actually loses an arm during this process. So Penguin actually gets a severed arm, and Sachi gets gored in the chest by a wild boar. You don't mess with a wild boar. I mean, it might be kind of funny at first, like, oh, ha, 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 a little pig in the forest. No, seriously, a wild boar in one-on-one combat with a human, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have a good weapon, or you're armed with just explosives that go off way too early than they should, that boar will probably wreck your shit up. So yeah, don't mess with a boar. Anyway, so Law and Wolf and Beppo show up, and they kind of scare off the boar. They get rid of it, and they bring Sachi and Penguin back to Wolf's house for treatment. So Sachi has a wound in his stomach, so he cures that. However, Penguin has a severed arm, and it takes Law several hours using his fruit, although I don't think he tells Wolf what the power is yet. He kind of does it in another room, or like just doesn't explain what he's doing. And Law is eventually able to attach Penguin's severed arm. Okay, and then he falls asleep, and the next day everybody's okay. Sachi's all right. Penguin's like moving his arm. Like, wow, it's just like new. How did you do that? You know, and so it seems like, okay, they're all going to be friends now. And so I guess the Heart Pirates were formed on that day. And that's only the end of chapter 1, right? Okay. Also, it would be very interesting if in the future we see Penguin, because they're always wearing those boiler suits. But if at one point Penguin takes off his suit or whatever, and we actually see his body underneath, it'd be cool if like Penguin had like a scar on his arm. And that was like, oh, that's where Law reattached his arm. So that would have been very interesting. So there is opportunities for Oda to like showcase that this is canon later on in the story. It'd actually be really cool if we saw that. So anyway, moving on with chapter 2, it's now been 2 months since then. We learned a little bit more about Pleasure Town and why it's actually called that. So I guess the story goes 20 years before this, Pleasure Town was attacked by a bunch of pirates, and they basically burned the whole damn city to the ground, okay? So after the pirates were defeated and pushed away, they rebuilt the entire town, and they called it Pleasure Town, with the idea of like everybody should respect one another, and, you know, everyone should just be kind to one another, so that way something like that doesn't happen again. Even though it wasn't really the reason why it was burned down the first time, it was mainly because pirates attacked, and you can't really do anything about that. But still, it's a nice idea that all the citizens of the town respect each other and are kindly to one another, and it's like an unspoken rule kind of situation, right? So anyway, Wolf takes everybody into town to start working. There is a peace officer, like a policeman there named Rudd. Paul Rudd is in this. And, Wolf is like, hey, I want these kids to, like, basically work in the town to, like, gain some extra money. They want to work. And Rudd's like, oh, okay, that's fine. But as your legal guardian, you have to sign off for it. And so he takes a piece of paper, and, like, they all sign the piece of paper, and Law's looking at it. And he's seeing, like, all their names on that sheet of paper. So, like, Wolf's name, Sachi, Penguin, Beppo, and Law. And he's like, holy crap, this is kind of like we're, like, a family or something. So it's been a few months now. It's been 3 months since he's cured himself, and he's been living with Wolf, and he met Beppo, Sachi, and Penguin. So it's starting to feel like a little bit more of a family unit, okay? And Law's beginning to open up a little bit, right? So, anyway, they all get different jobs in town. Beppo, because he's a little bit stronger than the average human, because he's a mink, starts working at a construction site. Law starts helping out at the local clinic where there's just one doctor and one nurse, so he's just, he's like running around kind of helping out with everything that needs to be helped out there, and he's learning a little bit more about being a doctor from the clinic. I think Sachi and Penguin both work as, like, waiters or something like that. Oh, no, I think Penguin works as a waiter, and Sachi always wanted to be a hairdresser, so he works as a hairdresser. That might also explain who cuts Law's hair. It's probably Sachi on board the Polar Tang. There you go. Just like we learned how the Straw Hats, like Sanji and Usopp and Robin, are the ones that cut the Straw Hats' hair. There you go. So eventually, though, they end up at Sachi's uncle's place, okay? Because I guess what happened is Sachi and Penguin reveal their backstory a bit, that their parents died, so they were essentially orphans, and they were living in a shack out in the middle of the woods. Because what happened was their uncle and aunt took them in, so this is very similar to Robin's backstory. However, their uncle was very cruel and basically forced them to go into town and, like, steal shit and commit crimes, and, he was just an asshole. So Sachi and Penguin decided to leave, and they just built, like, this clubhouse or shack out in the woods, and that's why they were living there, and, like, encountered the boar, and they were beating up Beppo. They just had a hard life, basically. They're just kids, basically. And so they end up going to Sachi's uncle's place, and Sachi's uncle is like, oh, you found Sachi and Penguin. That's cool. Hey, how much money do you want me to pay you? I'll buy them back from you. That's what he says. And so Law's about to kick their asses, but then Wolf is the one that steps in and actually decks out Sachi's uncle, and it's like, whoa! Yeah, you go, Wolf! And so it's sort of just like, bam! He's like, it's all right, kids. We're done here. We're going home. And then they storm off, and Sachi and Penguin are like, oh, okay, I guess you're our new dad. All right, cool. So that's a nice little moment there. A little bit later on, they're walking back home. So this is like a few weeks after this event, because like a timeline kind of jumps around all over the place. Eventually, Wolf gets into an accident while testing a new flying machine, and he crashes to the ground, and it looks like he's not going to make it. So that's when Law has to showcase the op fruit powers that he's been working on in secret for the last few months, and he's able to cure Wolf from his injuries or whatever. And so Wolf, though, at the same time, realizes that Law, hey, you have the op fruit, don't you? And Law's like, yeah, how do you know about it? And he's like, well, I read a story about it a long time ago. Listen, Law, no matter what, you cannot go around telling people you have that fruit. That is an insanely powerful devil fruit. And I also read that you can perform an immortal surgery, but it costs you your life. So there is no shortage of people in the world with evil intentions that would want that fruit. And Law begins to realize, because remember, like, the whole situation, hold on a second, let me go grab, I don't even know why I didn't have it. This is Law Week. Why don't I have the op fruit here? The whole intention with Corazon giving Law the op, that happened so fast, where Corazon literally got his hands on it and literally like forced Law to eat the damn thing. Law didn't really have time to realize everything about what it really meant to have this fruit, okay? And so Wolf explains it to him about the immortal surgery and what people would want with it, and they would want to manipulate you into using the surgery on them at the cost of your own life. And Law realizes, like, holy shit, that was probably why Doflamingo wanted this so bad. And he also realizes, if Doflamingo ever finds me, he's going to want to enslave me to make me use the immortal surgery on him. So that, like, Law begins to understand the weight of the fruit that he consumed. It's an amazing power, but it's also a very highly vaunted power by everybody in the world. And so Law agrees, like, yeah, don't worry, I won't tell anybody about this, Wolf. Okay. So that moment ends. Law cures Wolf from his injuries, and then we have a time skip where 3 years pass, all right? And then that ends chapter 2. They have a big party at the end of the day, and then a 3-year time skip, okay? So moving into chapter 3, Law is now 16 years old. Also, one other thing I missed there is Law also gets his finger tats at this time. So he goes to the local tattoo artist after he cures Wolf, and the tattoo artist is, I guess, his friend, and he's like, oh, so how's old man Wolf doing? Is he going to make it? And Law's like, yeah, that's good. And then he's like, oh, okay, cool. Hey, do you want some tattoos? And Law's like, you know what? Actually, I think I do. And so he gets death tattooed on his fingers, as we've seen in the story. And the tattoo artist is like, that's kind of weird. A kid your age would want death tattooed across their fingers. You know, why would you want that? Are you just going through your edgy phase? And Law is like, well, it's because I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. I'm going to be a surgeon, and surgeons are always like right next to death. And if we make one mistake, it could result in the death of a patient. So that's why I want death on my fingers. And the tattoo artist is like, yeah, so you're an edgy teenager. Gotcha! It's just like he tattoos death on the fingers. And that's the origin of that. So next up we have chapter 3, okay? So this is 3 years later, where at this point, Doflamingo has effectively taken over Dressrosa with, he's, manipulated King Riku Dole III to massacre his own subjects, and Doflamingo and his crew have taken over Dressrosa in the New World. And so the news of this is spreading all over the place, and Law has read about it. And ever since he read the newspaper article about Doflamingo taking the place over, he's begun to have horrible nightmares out of guilt. Because Law is like, he's doing this, things could have went differently if I didn't get involved with him, if I didn't get the op fruit, if Corazon didn't get involved. So he's just racked with guilt, basically, of all the horrible things that Doflamingo is doing. He's accepting it like that's his fault, okay? So Law is having, like, night terrors about, like, Doflamingo and everything. There is a pirate attack at Pleasure Town during this moment, and it turns out these are the same pirates that actually burned it to the ground 20 years ago. So these pirates have been pretty active for 2 decades, right? So this pirate crew is led by a dude named Artur, probably not related, Artur Bacca. Bacca, not Bacca as in B-A-K-A, which would be Bacca as in idiot in Japanese, but B-A-C-C-A. So still, Artur Bacca! You're not an idiot, Artur. You're not an idiot. It's okay. But anyway, essentially there is a lost treasure somewhere on the island. It was mentioned previously by Sachi or Penguin. One of them mentioned that there was like a pirate crew that landed on the island, like Swallow Island, like 60 years ago, and they all had had a disease, and so they planted their treasure, but before any of them could tell anyone where it was or write a map, they all died of this disease. So apparently there's some great treasure hidden on the island, so Artur Bacca shows up to try to get it back. He wants the treasure. And so that is when he wants to rebuild his crew and then eventually go to the Grand Line, okay? So basically, he has a devil fruit called the Dero no Mi, or the liquid fruit, dissolve fruit. There's a few different translations of this. It basically allows his own body to turn into a liquid, or like an acidic substance. He can control the acidity of it. It's very similar to Ashido's ability in My Hero Academia a little bit, where, you know, he can control the viscosity and the acidity of what he turns into. But not only can he physically turn his body into this gooey substance, he can also manipulate the wills of others by like making them dissolve, so they're basically susceptible to whatever orders he gives. So he's dissolving their sense of character, or dissolving their morality or their will, something like that. So it's a very powerful devil fruit when used in the hands of a very evil person like this Artur Bacca guy is, okay? So he uses the Dero no Mi to kind of control the townsfolk, and then there's 24 hours until after they die, because 24 hours of being manipulated in this way with their willpower being dissolved, they'll eventually just die, okay? So it means that Wolf, Beppo, Sachi, Penguin, and Law have to form a commando unit to save the town. Will they succeed? Damn straight. So they have a moment where they're talking to Wolf, and like Wolf's about ready to go into town, I guess, to fight them on his own, because it turns out, big shocker, Artur Bacca is actually Wolf's estranged son. Whoa! Bet you didn't see that happening, right? So he's like, you know, it's my son. He ran off years ago. He burned the town down and then started a pirate crew, and now he's back here again, and he's trying to get the treasure. You know, I'll take care of this. But then, you know, Beppo, Sachi, Penguin, Law, they're all like, no, we want to help out too. You know, and they're older now at this point, you know, and they're like, you know, ready to fight. You know, they've been training and stuff. And so Wolf's like, you know what? Okay, I'll let you guys fight alongside me. And this is the badass moment. This is the cool part in the novel, where Wolf is basically like, all right, let's go into my secret armory. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so cool. So he like, you know, goes into the back of his workshop. He's like, you know, doing this locking mechanism on this giant safe. I'm making some of this stuff up here because I just have to go with it. But he opens up this door. It's just like, it's like, all right, load up, lock and load, take what you want. We raid the town at dawn. We're gonna chase out every damn pirate. So now I imagine, like, I want you to imagine, like, it doesn't, I don't think, specifically say this, because this is also where there's a hidden cave that leads down into a cove with Wolf's greatest invention, which is actually the polar tang. It's the submarine. I like to think that it might not be a yellow submarine. Maybe Law painted it that later and added the heart pirate symbol. I like to think it was just like a regular, like, silver metal submarine, and then Law added all the accoutrements later. But this is the origin of the polar tang. It was built by Wolf. That's pretty cool, right? That also explains how the hell Law got his hands on a damn submarine. Law's a good surgeon, but he's not a mechanic or an engineer. I don't really think Beppo was like, Captain, I built us a submarine. You know, like, I don't see that happening. So it makes sense that this implies, like, okay, Wolf built it and then gave it to them. That's awesome, okay? But I just want you to picture the moment where, like, Wolf opens up this armory and there's just, like, you know, like, automatic weapons, shotguns, grenades. Law's just, you know, gearing up. You know, he's like a bandolier of bullets. Law has a shotgun, and it's just like, all right, we're doing this. You know, we're going 100% Stallone with this, basically, like the Expendables or some shit, okay? And so basically, chapter 3 ends with everybody getting into the submarine, going around the side of the island undetected. The pirates, with Artur Bacca's crew, they have set up a base on kind of like the beach, and so they rise up from the beach undetected, and then they attack the pirates, okay? And that's how chapter 3 ends, all right? So now we have chapter 4, which is the final chapter. The group actually managed to defeat most of the pirate crew fairly easily, except for 2 members. So Artur Bacca himself with the Dero no Mi, he's the captain, and then his vice captain. So in typical One Piece fashion, you know, it's the captain, vice captain, first mate that are the strongest, okay? And so the vice captain is named Connie Volcano. I'm Connie Volcano! And he's basically a sumo wrestler kind of type, okay? And so it's basically split down with Wolf and Law fighting against Artur Bacca, Sachi, Penguin, and Beppo fighting against this sumo wrestler Sailor Dude. Okay, so that fight starts first, and Sachi and Penguin are kind of defeated, but then Beppo looks up, and it's actually a full moon, so Beppo transforms into his Sulong and just wipes out Connie Volcano. I'm still thinking of Terminator, it's like, I am John Connor. Anyway. So this actually makes sense for an SBS that was just revealed recently in Volume 102, where it was somebody had a question about Beppo's true power, and Oda mentioned that, like, oh, well, Sachi and Penguin are more dependable in normal circumstances, but they have also seen Beppo's Sulong, and they know how terrifying and strong that is. And so he used it right here to, like, I imagine there's nothing left of Connie Volcano. I imagine Connie Volcano, like, they're fighting against him, and he's like, I am a sumo wrestler! Boom! Sumo smash! And then Sachi and Penguin are on the ground, and they're just like unloading shots into him, and it's like his giant belly is just deflecting the bullets, and he's like, oh ho ho! And it's like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to beat him, Penguin. Don't stop, Sachi! And then he get beaten down. It's like, this is it! And then Beppo just turns into a giant, ravenous, raging polar bear, and just rips Connie Volcano to shreds. All right, like there's an arm over there, there's his head over there, there's blood all over the beach, and then Sachi and Penguin are just like hugging each other like, ah! And then Beppo, looks down and he turns back and he's like, oh, well, he was really tough, huh, fellas? Like, yeah, really tough. And like Beppo is like just covered in blood. You ever see a polar bear like eat a seal or something and they're just covered in blood? Yeah, something like that probably. Anyway, we cut back over to Law and Wolf's fight here. They're fighting against Artur, and it was mentioned at this point, by the way, that Artur, he's looking for the treasure. So he's like, where's the treasure at, old man? And Wolf is like, there is no treasure. The town found it years ago, and then we used it to rebuild Pleasure Town, which you burned down. So congratulations. You basically caused us to use the treasure to build the town, which you've destroyed again. And Artur Bacca is really pissed about that. He's like, no! And so, I guess he knocks Wolf out. And, one of the things they picked up in the armory, this is a little weird, is that Wolf had a Karyoseki, a sea prism sword inside of his armory. So isn't that cool? So Law's getting geared up with, like, shotguns and, like, a sea prism sword. That would be so cool if Kikoku was a sea prism sword. How come that hasn't been done before? Anyway, it turns out Artur is able to break the Karyoseki saber, though. So it makes me think, like, okay, that's a little strange. So, I don't know, maybe it was just Karyoseki, like, coated, like it wasn't actually made out of the substance, because that's apparently supposed to be harder than diamond, so I don't think he'd be able to break it that easily, especially if he's a Devil Fruit user. He wouldn't even be able to touch it. So, maybe it's a situation like Smoker's Staff or something like maybe the tip of the blade was like Karyoseki, but maybe, like, the rest of it was just normal. So it's like, as long as you don't touch the tip of the blade, like with Smoker's staff, he was able to, like, shatter it or something. Still, that seems like a waste. It'd be really cool if Kikoku ended up being like Karyoseki or something. Anyway, so Law manages to defeat him by utilizing Counter Shock. This was the first time he uses Counter Shock, and then shocks the crap out of Artur and defeats him, and they turn him over to the authorities, okay? And so the Marines come and arrest him, and then everything's cool. I guess he would have a bounty on his head, and Law is not a pirate at this point, so I guess they would just get the bounties. That's pretty neat. Maybe they'd probably give it to Wolf. So anyway, though, that pretty much wraps up the light novel. There is a brief epilogue that just kind of takes place a few years later. So Sachi, Penguin, Beppo, and Law, they all leave. They take the Polar Tang. Wolf gifts it to them. He stays behind, though, on the island because he's a little bit too old to be going out to be a pirate and adventuring. And the epilogue is just Rudd, who's like the police officer, just speaking with Wolf and like looking at the newspaper, seeing that Law started the Heart Pirates, seeing that they're starting a new adventure. He has a bounty, and they're making big names for themselves in the north, and they're eventually probably going to head to the Grand Line. And Wolf is just happy. He's just like, good for Law. I hope he finds somebody in the world, like a large family he can trust and everything. And that's the end of the novel. So yeah, like I said, this does not include everything because these are just summaries I found on the wiki pretty much. You'd have to read the actual novel to get all the details there. But still, like, that's a pretty solid story for Law's origin. I don't think it doesn't reek of, like, really bad fan fiction or something. know what I mean? Like, it seems to fit pretty well of like, okay, Law meets this like old inventor on an island and he raises him there and he learns how to trust others and he runs into Sachi Penguin and Beppo, who were already revealed to have met there during the SBS. So that ties back in. Wolf is an inventor that created the Polar Tang and gives it to Law, and that makes sense too. And so he stayed on the island and learned how the op fruit worked, and this is how he first learned counter shock and everything on this pirate crew that he fought against. It all seems to work pretty well. We get an allusion to Beppo's Sulong form in this novel. Sachi and Penguin's backstory is expanded upon a lot, which we haven't gotten at all in the story. So I think it all fits. I think it works really well, and it was a relatively short light novel. It doesn't like extend its stay, but it also leaves stuff open to the imagination. Like, you know, how did Law go with like, you know, the first year or so being a pirate? You know, so there's a lot of other stories and a lot of other adventures that are perfect groundwork. If there wants to be a sequel to this light novel, for instance, you could easily make one, okay? Law is a very popular character, and I think there might be very well be a sequel to this. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be day 2 of Law Week in the books, moving along at a good pace. Anyway, thanks for watching. Tekking, Berry, Fruit, signing out. Later, everyone.